What's up YouTube, Adam here, and in this video I'm going to be bringing you a full comparison between the new 12-inch MacBook and the iPad Air 2. Now, one of the most common questions I get is which one should I choose between these two products, and obviously with them being fairly expensive it's important to make an educated decision. So here we go. I've put it down into a few different sections that I think are important. I'm going to go through them one by one and you guys let me know at the end of the video which one you prefer or which one would suit your workflow the most, or maybe even which one you would just like to have the most. Now first up, let's talk about the price. Expensive on the MacBook side, $12.99 or £1,050, and that comes with 256GB SSD. The iPad, $6.99 or £559, and that comes with 128GB worth of storage. Now there are a few variations in that, so it could get more or less expensive on either side, but either way you are looking at almost double with the MacBook in comparison to the iPad Air 2. So definitely a huge factor to bring into the equation when looking at both of these products. Now let's look at the all-important screen. Very important. The screen on the iPad, 4:3 aspect ratio, 264 ppi with that 2048 by 1536 resolution. On the MacBook we've got 2304 by 1440, and that gives us 226 pixels per inch, and that's a 16:10 aspect ratio. So the main difference there really is the aspect ratio, but I've got to say when you're actually going in very close on the text and you're looking at it in great detail, the iPad doesn't give a nicer text as it does on the MacBook. You can see here the text on the iPad cut over to the MacBook, and it's just that little bit better, and I find the overall experience viewing the MacBook screen just that tiny little bit better than the iPad. Now let's get on to the all-important performance. You can see here the Geekbench scores. Not quite sure how much they really come into true reality, but there they are anyway. And if we look at some real-life tests, what you'll actually see is that in day-to-day flicking between applications and general bits and pieces, even opening up quite powerful apps, things like the Office suite for example, that are large applications over 200 megabytes each, the iPad actually is a little bit faster than the MacBook in almost everything it does, and we also saw by the overall multi-CPU count that the iPad is also a little bit more grunty as well in the back end. So very interesting there, but overall I've got to say the actual user experience in terms of performance is definitely a little bit faster on the iPad. Things are just that little bit more zippy, they fly around that much faster, and it's just a little bit more of a joy to use. On the MacBook things can lag ever so slightly, especially when you've got quite a few things running, especially if they are CPU intensive. Now next up, battery life. They've both got incredible battery life. If it was the iPad Air and not the 2, it would definitely blow the MacBook away. But the iPad battery is not quite so good on the version 2 model in my opinion, and they're pretty much similar, but still ridiculously good in the battery life, and I get a good 8 to 10 hours out of each one regardless of what I'm doing, unless it's ridiculously high intensity stuff. Now the operating system, obviously on the Mac you get OS X, on the iPad you get iOS, and the operating system OS X is definitely more flexible than iOS, although in the new version of iOS we're going to get multitasking, so that will help a lot, but you can still do a hell of a lot more on OS X than you'll ever be able to do on iOS. So for me, definitely OS X a lot more powerful there. Now let's look at connectivity. That polarizing 3.1 USB port on the MacBook that everyone talks about, the only connectivity it has in terms of physical cables, and on the iPad we've got the Lightning port. They've both got Wi-Fi AC and they both have Bluetooth 4.0, so I'd say they're almost fairly even on the connectivity, although that USB 3.1 is definitely better than a Lightning port. Now onto the design itself, and I've got to say they are both beautiful devices. They're an absolute joy to video, and I would have to say that the MacBook has the slight edge purely because there's just so much more to it. It's an absolutely stunning device. It's probably the most incredible laptop I've ever seen. It really is just beautiful in almost every single way. A joy to look at, a joy to touch, a joy to use, and I really can't say enough about it. The iPad, still a great looking device, but definitely the MacBook edges it. Now in terms of input, on the MacBook we get that huge Force Touch trackpad. It really is fantastic, works extremely well. You've got a whole bunch of touch gestures on it, and then we've got the keyboard as well, which is a great keyboard. On the iPad we've got obviously the entire screen, which is essentially a touchpad, and you've got a whole bunch of multi-touch gestures built into that as well. Now the actual keyboard on the iPad, for me, very usable. I can type quite quickly on it. I have no problems at all, and once you get used to it and it's laying down on a flat surface, you really can type pretty quickly considering what you're actually doing. But there's never a comparison to an actual full-size keyboard, and you definitely won't go wrong with the MacBook keyboard. The actual movement, the distance the keys travel on the MacBook is not like it was on previous versions, but still very fast to type on. Now let's look at the cameras, the all embarrassing camera on the MacBook 480p. You can see it's absolutely awful, much the same as my bedhead hair in this actual video as well. The cameras on the iPad, spectacular, amazing rear facing camera that we don't really need to go into, 1080p, 120 frames per second slow-mo, etc, etc. Front facing camera, 1.2 megapixels, 720p, great cameras on the iPad, terrible on the MacBook. The MacBook also has incredibly sounding stereo speakers, whereas the iPad speakers really could be a lot better. Now in terms of flexibility, both ridiculously flexible due to their lightweight and thinness. The MacBook, even though you've got a fold out screen, still able to move it around, very mobile, but the iPad has so many different things that you can use it for, and it is ridiculously flexible in every single way, and for me, most definitely more flexible than the MacBook. Anyway guys, let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and I will see you all in the next one. See ya. This video was sponsored by Your Company Mobiles, providing SMEs throughout the UK with mobile, landline and converged solutions. Visit www.yourcompanymobiles.com or call 0800 038 5363.